This is lesson 6, a world of the spirits. This is always a fun one because we get to share our ghost stories. Here it starts out with the Song of Quetzalcoatl. It says, "And forthwith I say in sorrow, here on earth there is no good land. Surely in some other region is the dwelling place of gladness. Of what use this land terrestrial? There must be a life celestial." And they probably didn't use those words because this was an interpretation, but they had those concepts. So that's kind of an interesting idea. It says everything living is composed of two parts. We all know that there's a material part that dies and decomposes, and then there's a spiritual part that does not. Non-material part of any living thing is called the mental or spirit, which I think is real interesting that he would call the spirit the mental part. So it's like, who's doing the thinking? you know can you really point to one spot in your brain and say that's where the seed of that thought is comes from? There's we don't really know where thinking comes from. When the mental and mortal parts of any living thing are joined together, we say it is alive. When the spirit and the body are permanently separated, we say it is dead. So that kind of begs the question, well, permanently separated, can you temporarily separate? And good medicine teaches that the spirit or mental part of a living being does not die, but merely becomes detached from the mortal part of it. So, Einstein says that energy can neither be created nor destroyed, but merely changes form from one form to another. Like water changes from steam to liquid to ice, but it's all still H2O. Chief Joseph says, "My father sent for me. I saw he was dying. I took his hand in mine and he said, 'Son, my body is returning to my mother earth and my spirit is going very soon to see the great spirit chief. When I am gone, think of your country. You are the chief of these people.'" So even back then, they had this idea that there was two parts. There was a spirit part and then there is a mortal part, a physical part. Well, what do they do when they separate? Chief Seattle says, "When the last red man shall have perished and the memory of my tribe shall have become a myth among the white men, these shores will swarm with the invisible dead of my tribe. And when your children's children think themselves alone in the field, the store, the shop, or in the silence of the pathless woods, they will not be alone. At night, when the streets of your cities and villages are silent and you think them deserted, they will throng with the returning hosts that once filled them and still love this beautiful land. The white men will never be alone." So have you ever felt spirits near? Have you had this idea that there's something else out there? When I first came to Arkansas to study with Eli, there was this hotel that was needing some help, and so I decided to work there for a while. And it was an old hotel. It was made in 1920, and it was right by the railroad track. So it was kind of a depot. People on the railroad would stay there. It was a boarding house for a while, and then for a time there was a dentist office on the ground floor. Well, there was 2 stories and a bunch of bedrooms upstairs. Well, so I was cleaning upstairs one day and running the vacuum down the hall. And as I passed one of these rooms, I swore I could see the bottom of a lady's full skirt turned, like she was standing there and she turned and walked into the room. I didn't see anything from the waist up, but all I saw was the hem of her skirt, really, just turn and walk into the room. And another time I was walking down that hall and I saw that as I passed one of the rooms, I thought I saw that there was a lady sitting there combing her hair, looking like she was sitting at a vanity or something, looking in a mirror. And I backed up and I looked in that room, and there was no mirror, there was no vanity, there was no person in there. But it sure looked like that as I walked by. So have you ever felt that way? Have you ever seen something out of the corner of your eye? And would you like to share? Do you want to share your story?
Well, before, like, because now currently I'm into like some energy type stuff, but like back before I really realized what that all meant and what that was, um, like my first, like, I remember seeing things when I was a kid, and I think kids are fairly open to that, in
Hmm.
that stage of life. And so I, like, my parents would say, "Oh, you're just seeing stuff again." And it's like, no, not when you're wide awake and your eyes are wide open. So
Yeah.
like my first memories would be seeing um a panther. That was the first animal I saw. And then the first what I would say human spirit I saw was a Native American boy. Little boy. Scared me to death when that happened, and I like ran into my brother's room and like jumped in his bed because I was so scared. Those were my first experiences. So yeah, I've seen it with eyes wide open.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
out there. It's all around us.
Yes. Well, we can only
Yeah.
see a certain spectrum, and there's all kinds of more that's out there that we can't see. So yeah, we're surrounded by all kinds of things. Sonia, did you have a story you wanted to share?
I kind of didn't want to share, but I will. Um,
Okay.
so we took care of my father-in-law while he was dying of cancer, and before he came up, my husband said he was bringing him from Arizona, and so I told my sons, "Okay, Papa's coming. We need to have a room prepared for him." And we only have 3 rooms in my house, so my youngest son, he said that he didn't want to let Papa stay in his room. And my oldest son said he can stay in my room. So my oldest son gave up his room because we only have 3 rooms, one for my husband and I, one for my oldest, and one for my youngest. And my oldest son gave up his room. Well, later on, when he did pass, because he stayed here for a while with us, like way longer than we had thought. But he haunts our house now.
Oh,
And I can't really explain it, but sometimes because he used to always ask me, he drank a lot, and he would always stand in the hallway and have his little glass and ask me for 2 ice cubes and his Apple Crown whiskey. But I can't really explain it, but he stands in the hallway sometimes at my house. The TVs come on and off. Sometimes my water faucets turn on. There's certain things that happen, but most of all, right after he died, my friend told me we can sage the house together. So we saged the house, and for a while there, he didn't appear. But then my son started coming to us and crying because he's like, Papa, and this is my youngest son, the one that said he didn't want him in his room because he was worried he'd haunt him.
oh my gosh.
Well, he does haunt his room, and he comes and and he's 19, so he's older. He's not a baby or anything, but he comes to my husband from time to time, and he's like, Papa's in the room, and you can see his handprint go into the mattress. You can see his hand making an indentation in the mattress. So yeah,
Huh.
he's definitely there. He's definitely part of our house now.
Wow.
So yeah, and my husband did not get along with his dad whatsoever growing up. He wasn't the best father. And when he did come and live with us, that relationship kind of changed because my husband was taking care of him, and he just, that bond finally got to exist between them, which was really beautiful to see. And I always got along with my father-in-law. We got along really well always, but my husband had a troubled um, upbringing with him. So um, Yeah, I don't know, but yeah, he haunts us.
Huh, that's
He's
weird.
definitely.
Yeah, thank you for that story. It's an interesting story. I had another experience with my daughter. I was driving down this old dirt road, didn't have an urgency to get home because we were just enjoying the evening. It was a summer evening and the windows were open and we were watching the little um, lightning bugs out in the field and just kind of moseying down this dirt road. And I had my lights on so I could see the whole road. There was nobody there. And all of a sudden, right in my daughter's window, there was this deep voice it didn't sound like it said anything in particular, but there was a deep voice. And she screamed, and the hair on my arm stood up. And we decided we could go a little faster down that road. But I don't know what that was because there's nothing out there. There's no houses. It was only a cow field on either side of us at the time. So, and we could see the road. There was nothing there. So I don't know what that was. But that was kind of odd. All kinds of spirits, out there. It's been found that a person can, by training, cause the mental part of him or herself to separate from the mortal part for a while. This temporary separation is called an out of the body experience. You ever heard of that? You have an out of the body experience? Yeah. Um, I have a couple of stories, so be thinking about your stories. um, Ella one time told me that she was riding a horse and the horse threw her, tried to jump over something and she wasn't ready for that. So she got thrown off the horse and she thought she was going to get hurt. She was a little girl. And so she thought she was going to get hurt when she hit the ground. And so she went out of her body, she says, and she watched herself hit the ground. And she saw that she was okay. So she went back into her body and she remembers that. I think usually if something like that happens, you don't remember that kind of stuff, but she remembered it. Another time was my daughter she's now 44, but when she was 12, she got hit by a truck and she died for a few minutes. She was on the wrong side of the highway, and here it was 5:30. She was trying to race home because I was going to be home in just a minute, and it started to rain, so the street lights hadn't come on yet, and it was getting dark. She was on the wrong side of the highway, and she was racing to get home, and she was on a bike, and she came around the corner, and wasn't watching, I guess, and this pickup truck just ran right into her. It collapsed a lung and broke a collarbone, and she broke her arm and a bunch of other stuff. And she was in the intensive care for a couple of weeks. But while she was out of her body, she says she remembers looking down at the scene and seeing that her body was not usable anymore. And she remembers thinking, that was short. Like she was confused that it should have been longer, but oh well. so she so she immediately turns and hears this beautiful bright light. She said it felt like the best hug she'd ever had, and she wanted to go into that light. And about that time she heard my mother's voice, who had died about 5 years earlier, telling her that it wasn't her time yet, that she needed to go back, that she had more to do. And right about then, the paramedics were there and shocking her heart back into action, and she went right back into her body just like that. But she remembers being out of the body and how wonderful that felt to see the light. And she says now that she's not afraid of dying because that's going to be a wonderful adventure, she thinks. So have you ever had an experience like that with someone? Something you'd like to share, anybody? Or have you ever done that? Have you ever felt like you were out of the body?
Okay, this one I'll share. So, I pass out quite a bit from time to time, and but one time I really felt I was gonna die. I I just got work done on one of my teeth, and I had it pulled while I was awake. And the next morning, I kept coming in and out of consciousness, and finally, when I had enough consciousness, I called my husband, and I was like, "I'm gonna die." there's something wrong. I can't stay awake. Come
Oh,
home
boy.
now. I crawled to the front room, and that bright light that you see, I seen that bright light come, and it was a beautiful, beautiful bright light. And but that was it, because eventually my mother-in-law got there and she got me water and, helped me come back.
Mm,
And everything was moving. And at the
wow.
time I was breastfeeding my son, so I think I was just really dehydrated and medicated from the teeth work the day before. But it was a really weird experience. I mean, I've had where I passed out and came back, um, but that time in particular, it just really felt like I was about to die.
Yeah, I can see where it would feel like that. Have you ever seen Christopher Titus? He's a comedian on YouTube. He's got some crazy stuff on YouTube that's real fun to listen to because he had a terrible upbringing, but he made a joke out of it. So it's anyway, he's got a good attitude. And he talks about being in the dentist office and having a lot of nitrous oxide, and to the point where he felt himself floating out of the chair and floating up through the ceiling and floating up through the building and floating clear out into space. And he says he remembers watching the earth get smaller and smaller. I didn't know you could go that far when you were out of the body, but apparently you can. So anyway, he's a hilarious guy to listen to. He keeps saying, and I'm not kidding, this really happened. So a lot of people will think you won't believe him because it is pretty crazy. But yeah, out of the body experiences. There's a lot of books that are written on this subject. You can read all kinds of people's adventures doing that. Black Elk says, it may be good to mention here that it is not without reason that we humans are two-legged, along with the wings. For you see, the birds leave the earth with their wings, and we human may also leave this world, not with wings, but in spirit. Apparently we can, even though we're still attached to the body. Black Elk goes on to say, Crazy Horse dreamed and went into the world where there is nothing but the spirits of all things. That is the real world that is behind this one. And everything we see here is something like a shadow from that world. So what is the real world? If this isn't the real world, what is the real world? They say that the real world is the world of thought, because everything that was created had to be thought of first. So even if you're going to make a chair, you have to think about the chair. You have to create it in your mind before you can actually hold it in your hand. So that's what they say is the real world. The real world is the world of thought. People who practice this out of the body experience find that they are exactly the same person after being out of the body as they were before. No miraculous changes happen to the spirit when it is separated. Now, some people think that when you have one of these out of the body experiences that you go and read the Akashic records and now you're all knowing and you know everything there is to know. Well, no. You have this experience, and so that experience changes you somewhat, but you don't learn all kinds of things because of that. Eli taught that a spirit or mental person who leaves his or her body permanently is also exactly the same person after death as they were before death. So just like the person who has the out of the body experience, when you die, you're still the same person. You just don't have this body anymore. So let's see. This is a Nadawisi Indian funeral speech. And he says, you still sit among us, brother. Your person retains its usual resemblance and continues similar to ours, without any visible deficiency except that it has lost its power of action. But where has that breath flown, which a few hours sent up breath to the Great Spirit? Why are those lips silent that lately delivered to us expressive and pleasing language? Why are those feet motionless that a short time ago were fleeter than the deer on yonder mountains? Why useless hang those arms that would climb the tallest tree or draw the toughest bow? Alas, every part of that frame which we lately beheld with admiration and wonder is now become as inanimate as it was 300 years ago. But we will not bemoan thee as if you were lost to us forever, or that your name would be buried in oblivion, because your soul lives in that great country of spirits with those of the nation that are gone before you. Well, it is, Matu Kuapi says it is the general belief of the Indians that after a man dies, his spirit is somewhere on the earth or in the sky. We don't know exactly where, but we are sure that his spirit still lives. So, if you're exactly the same person after you die as you were before you died, then what happens next? How do you get released from this world? Well, it's been determined that the spirit must live many lives to learn and experience all the astrological medicines of the great medicine wheel. Eli taught that somewhere in the mental world, the world of the spirits, there is a mastermind, a living power, which is an amalgamation of all the experiences of all the lives lived by that entity. Because of the desire to progress, the mastermind sends out a part of itself to be the spirit of a person on earth. So after you've amalgamated, you replayed this lifetime back into your big mastermind of all your past lives, then a piece of that gets sent back to earth to become the new spirit. So whatever you have learned in the past in other lives, you have a tiny piece of that with you now. And it can be more easily developed, of course, than something that you haven't practiced. So you have a lot of potential because of the stuff that you've had before. And Meiosis Storm says, the Sun Dancer believes that each person is a unique living medicine wheel, powerful beyond imagination, and that it has been limited and placed on this earth to touch, experience, and learn. Each man, woman, and child at one time was a living power that existed somewhere in time and space. These powers were without form, but they were aware, they were alive. Each power possessed boundless energy and beauty. These living medicine wheels were capable of nearly everything. They were beautiful and perfect in all ways except one. They had no understanding of limitation, no experience of substance. These beings were total energy of the mind without body or heart, and they were placed upon this earth that they might learn the things of the heart through touching. Isn't that a beautiful way to put that? Learn the things of the heart through touching. The mastermind thus grows by gaining more experiences through the senses of that living individual. So our bodies are kind of like this biosensory gathering mechanism that gathers up all this information of stuff that we're learning and sends it off to the mind to think about. All habits, passions, and desires are possessed by the mind or mental person after death in exactly the same degree as they existed in life. However, for one's mastermind to absorb the bad medicine of the individual's mortal desires and defects would result in regression, not progression. So we got to get rid of those. These mortal desires thus tie the mental self to this world until it purges itself of all earthly wants or worries. Even a spirit's concern for the family of its earthly life will keep it tied to this place until its mind ceases to worry and purges itself of such earthly concerns. So if you want to get out of here as fast as possible, you got to tie up all your loose ends. Make sure that, when my mother got ready to die, she asked me to come up there and she told me to write somebody's name on the back of pictures and different things that she wanted to give away, because she was concerned that nobody would know who to give these things to if she wasn't. And so would you be, if nobody was there to tell your kids or your husband or your friends what to do with your stuff, they wouldn't know. So That's what you got to do, is take care of your affairs, write a will or tell your kids what to do, or set up some kind of a fund or do something, because you will worry about it when you're not able to make effects in this world anymore. So that's the best way to get out of here fast, is tie up your loose ends before you leave. So the individual mind of a deceased person will not be accepted into its master entity until it has purged itself of all desires and defects. So even your concern for your family, if you're worried that your husband's going to cry forever and not be able to do with your kids and so you're going to be concerned about all that. Of course you would. So you're going to be hanging around until you can see that your family's going to survive. They're going to get over this and they're going to move on. And so usually it takes a while for that to happen. Eli called this time of purging purgatory and described it as a time, not a place, as some are led to believe. Like the Catholics say, purgatory is a place you go to think about this stuff. But he says it's not a place, it's a time when you have to get rid of all your worries about this world. And no one can really help the spirit at this stage, since it alone must conquer these desires. Like you couldn't help somebody get over missing their spouse, that's something they have to do, or their kids. You can't really help them do that. Eli taught that it usually takes about a year for a spirit to rid itself of mortal desires. For this reason, the family of the person who had died usually lived in a special way for a year and a day in honor of the deceased, in order to make this time of purging as easy as possible. In the book, The Sacred Pipe, Black Elk describes the instructions given by the tribal chief to a man whose son had just died. And these instructions are good for all of us if we have somebody in our family who's died. Black Elk says, "You are now keeping the soul of your own son, who is not dead, but is with you. From now on, you must live in a sacred manner, for your son will be in this teepee until his soul is released. You should remember that the habits which you establish during this period will remain with you always. You must take great care that no bad person enters the lodge where you keep the soul, and that there be no arguments or dissensions. There should always be harmony in your lodge, for all these things have an influence on the soul which is being purified here." So you can see how that would help the deceased person to be able to move on. If you could show them that your family's going to be okay, we're going to do all right. You don't have to stay. So after conquering these desires and concerns, the spirit then begins its journey to the next stage of its existence. Well, the spirit of the individual mind is now free to join with its living power or mastermind of past identities. Eli taught that the higher mind contains every thought, word, sight, sound, smell, taste, and sensation that the entity experienced while walking upon the earth. After death, and once the desires have been purged, the lifetime of impressions are played into the memory of one's mastermind in exact detail, so that it can assimilate all the learning of the individual's life on earth at that time. I remember being 4 years old, because it was before I went to school, and I was laying on the hill in the backyard, and I was thinking, I'm wondering if I was actually living my life or if this was me remembering it. I always thought that was an odd thing. So maybe that's what I was thinking about, is this the replay of the life, or is this me actually having my life? Eli taught that since all learning is done one thought at a time, the mastermind must absorb it at the same rate. This playing back in detail, therefore, can take as much time as it took to experience. From this, we can consider that a rebirth cycle might proceed as follows. We'll assume that your length of life is 70 years. Then it takes about a year to go through purgatory and release yourself from the concerns. And then it takes another 70 years to play back every thought and what's it say? Every thought, word, sight, sound, smell, taste, and sensation that you experienced while walking on the earth. So you got to go through it all again and go, well, what did I learn from all this? Then you spend a year waiting for rebirth. So it takes 9 months to make a body. So that's pretty much all of it. But it takes a year to get back. And so the whole time passing is 70 years. If your life was 70 years long, it takes 142 years from childhood to childhood. So if they say that that people should be concerned for the next 7 generations, well, if a generation is 20 years, 20 times 7 is 140 years. So what you're really being concerned about is that you want the world to be better when you come back. That's really what we're talking about. If you want to think about how it's going to affect the next 7 generations, yeah, you want it to be better when you come back. So this time it will vary with each individual, of course, because many factors involved in all 4 phases are parts of that circle. So I was thinking about, the people who were in the Civil War, for instance. That was, how long ago was that? That was like over 100 years ago. So if they were like 50 years old when they died, they would be coming back. They'd probably be our parents or like that. Anyway, an interesting thing. And if you look back in your own genealogy, look back 140 years, 150 years ago, who was there? Who's somebody in your family? If you love your family, you come back in your same family. If you don't love them, then maybe you're just visiting for this lifetime. But if you love your family, then you're going to come back in that same family every time. So you can look back in your genealogy and say, well, who was around 140 years ago, 130 years ago? That seems familiar. That could be you. Well, at the end of the playback or integration time, the mastermind then examines itself in the light of these new experiences and determines what strengths are yet needed or what weaknesses still need conquering before the entity can progress further along the spiral of perfection. It then determines which astrological medicine and which tribe of people the entity needs for this new learning. Medicine people have always felt that it is in the world of the spirits where all true living takes place, and that the experiences we have on earth are but reflections of the real world known by our spirits. There's that thing again, the real world. So we examine what's been going on and we say, well, what do I need now? Black Elk says, I looked about me and could see that what we were doing was like a shadow cast upon the earth from yonder vision in the heavens. So bright it was and clear. I knew the real was yonder and the darkened dream of it was here. Can you imagine the love that must be, this great love that you must feel when you're disembodied, when you're back into the spirit world? It just, there just must be this great idea of, I want to be like these people. I want to be like these spirits. I want to be like these. It must be that, because why else would you want to come back? I mean, why else? There has to be some big draw, big thing. Well, without a body during its existence in the land of the spirits, an entity can communicate with a person on earth through that person's higher mind, which is the spirit of the person on earth during this lifetime. Ohiesa says, I know that our people possess remarkable powers of concentration and abstraction, and I sometimes fancy that such nearness to nature as I've described keeps the spirit sensitive to impressions not commonly felt and in touch with the unseen powers. Some of us seem to have a peculiar intuition for the locality of a grave, which they explained by saying that they had received a communication from the spirit of the departed. In Arkansas, when I was I was doing some typesetting for this lady who was writing them a magazine, the historical and genealogical magazine for this county that I was living in. And she was a grave, um, she divined for graves. Because in Arkansas, during the Civil War, there was so many people that got killed that they would just bury them where they fell. They didn't take the time to try to figure out who they were or ship them back to wherever they belonged, because that wasn't possible back then. So they would just bury them right there. And so there's a lot of unmarked graves. Well, that's what this lady would do is she'd go out there with her divining rods and she'd find where these places were and put a marker there. Well, I was working for the newspaper at the time, and the guy who was the head of the newspaper got real interested in what she was saying, and she talked him into coming with her, and they both did it. And he was so excited when he got back. He said, "I did it too. It worked for me." So that kind of stuff apparently is not that hard to teach. Now there's a lot of people in Arkansas do the water witching. They witch for where where the wells should be put, because there's a lot of holes in the Ozark Mountains. They're made of limestone, so the rain makes big holes in the rocks. And so it's hard to find where the water is because it drains, it's big holy system there. And so they have these water witchers that would tell the big machinery where to start digging. And when I was working in this chiropractic office, this lady came in whose last name was Witcher. And so I asked her, I just asked her if anybody in her family did that. And she says, "Oh yeah, way back, her great uncle or somebody, they would never say that they did it themselves." Because, oh my goodness, what are you saying? In Arkansas, you can't say that stuff. But she did that, and I know that when Eli bought that land up there, that he had somebody come out, and so I know they still do that, or they did back in the 70s when he bought that land. So it's not an old practice; they still do it. So there's lots of things you can divine for, and one of them is these old graves. Okay, well, here's the questions. Every living thing is composed of two parts. What are they and how are they different? Chris, what do you think? Two parts.
You said every living thing is composed of two parts, like the physical and the mental, the spiritual. Is that what
Yes,
you're speaking of?
yes. One is, and they are different because one of them lives forever, one is immortal and lives forever, and the other one is temporary and dies at the end of this life. So the separation of mind and body was discussed in here. Does this separation have any effect on the spirit? Sonia, what do you think? If you have an out of the body experience, does that have an effect on your spirit?
The spirit, no, because the spirit never dies. It's just the body that dies. It's just a detachment that happens.
Yes. So you have that experience, but it doesn't really change you a lot. And we think that is true because of all the books that have been written about this stuff. These people that have had these experiences will tell you all about their experience, but they don't go into the Akashic records and all that stuff. They just have that experience. So what must the spirit do before it joins with its master mind? Autumn Breeze, what do you think? Can you put your mic on? Can you figure it out? There you go.
Wow, that was weird. It wouldn't do it. Well, it has to go through these stages of purgatory and all these other things before it reaches that point. And
Yes.
also, I think it has to go through the medicine wheel before it gets to that. Don't you think so? Through that mastermind, because you have to master your all of the medicine wheel before you reach
Well, that's what we're doing
that
here on
point.
Earth.
Don't you think?
That's what we're doing here
Well,
on
yeah.
Earth is we're going through our curriculum
Oh,
here on
okay.
Earth.
So we have to do the purgatory thing and go through all of those
Yes.
miraculous changes.
We have to release ourselves from the concerns of this world.
Right. Yeah, like don't call on your dead one or your loved one that's passed
Yeah, try
and
not.
stuff like that. You shouldn't do that at
No, because
all.
it calls them back. Yeah, that these people that
Yep.
can't let go of their departed, kids and stuff, and keep calling them back and keep wanting to talk to them. Then that's not helpful.
Yeah, it's unhealthy for you as well.
Yes, gotta let those people go. So, what is a person's mastermind? What is that? Martha, are you there? What is a person's mastermind?
Yeah. A person's mastermind is the amalgamation of all of their experiences and their past lives and their thoughts and
Yes.
everything else that comes along with it.
Right. This is everything, every life you've ever lived is in this mastermind. So we're supposed to grow and supposed to change. Winston Churchill said to grow is to change and to perfect is to change often. So we should always be changing. So what is this process of integration? What are they talking about? Integrating. Daniel, what do you think that is?
Oh, well, it's important to note that, what I come to Earth here to learn is about love. And I explained all the wonderful things that I learned about love with the mastermind.
Well, you review all your whole life, what has happened, and you decide, yep, what you've learned and what you haven't learned and what you need to learn yet. And so then, what does the mastermind do at the end of the integration or playback time? What happens then?
He decides what you still need to learn, what your deficiencies are, and
Yes.
plan out our next life. Figure out what we're going to do in the next lifetime.
Mm-hmm. So, yep, if you had a problem with some race, you might be reborn as that race so that you have that perspective so that you get over that idea.
Yep.
Can those in the real world communicate with us?
Yes.
Yes, they
Yes,
sure
they
can. They sure can. Within the mind, there are three parts. The subconscious, which is below the consciousness. That's the stuff that takes care of your breathing and your digestion and, your heart rate and all that. Then there's the conscious. That's the part you're aware of. And then there's the superconscious, which is above the consciousness. So which one of these corresponds to a person's spirit? Which one? Is it subconscious, conscious, or superconscious? Well, it's the superconscious. So what he's calling, he talks about the spirit and the mind as being two things, as being the same thing, which I always thought was interesting as how it says within the mind there are three parts. So part of the mind is attached to the body, and part of the mind is the spirit.
Mm.
So what is your perception of your relatedness to all of creation? What do you think? Somebody want to take a stab at that? What's our relation to our relatedness to all of creation? Are we related to creation?
I think that
We are
we're not only related to creation, we're part of creation. So like creation is in all of us.
Yes, because the Great Spirit, we all started out as a thought of the Great Spirit, so we all have that within us. So yes, we're all related. Just as if we were all part of the same family, the same mother, the same dad, we're all related.
Yep. We are one.
Yeah. And we need to start recognizing that how wonderful that is instead of
Right.
beating each other up about it. It's crazy.
Right.
Well, the next one we're going to talk about is the medicine wheel, the personal medicine wheel. And we'll talk about what is medicine and how to recognize good medicine and bad medicine in your life. Always good to know. And boy, we have two left. And then I'm going to take a week and try to get some initiations done. And then we'll start in on the wisdom in living section, probably that the week of the 10th through the 14th. We have to start it during that week because that's before Mercury goes retrograde, and we got to get in there before that happens. Because you know it's crazy. Have you ever done that? Tried to start something new during Mercury retrograde? It just doesn't work. You're either unhappy with it, or it doesn't work out, or things get in the way, or I don't know. It's always crazy. I bought a car one time during Mercury retrograde, and I wasn't going on the way there. I realized Mercury was retrograde, and oh my God, what am I doing? So I decided I was going to go anyway, and because they had this wonderful sale, they were going to pay your tax, on the car for you if you bought it during that weekend. And so I thought, well, I got to go do this. Well, I found I wanted it. I had specific things I wanted, and they had one car that matched everything I wanted. And they because I decided I wanted it for a certain price, and I told them what I wanted it for, and they decided that because I was going to get a deal on the price, that they couldn't pay my tax on it, the sales tax.
Oh,
and so that's what I told them, is I'm not going to do this then if you're not going to do that, because that's why I came all the way out here, 5-hour drive to go to this place. And so finally I walked away from this deal 4 times, and I was trying to get into the car and go away. And every time he would come out to me and he'd say, oh, I just talked to my manager, we can do what you want. And so every time I'd go back, and finally he gave me exactly what I wanted for the price I wanted and everything. And then a couple of years later, I realized it didn't have cruise control. So it wasn't a really good thing for me. So anyway, so things don't usually work out as good if you do them when Mercury's retrograde. So we gotta start before that or after it. And it's over with on the 7th of April. And I don't really want to start that late because it just, anyway. So if you want to get initiated and get in on this, the magic lessons, we got to do that before the 15th of March. So let me figure it out so we can get you all in here to do that. And I will see you next time. Anybody have any other questions or anything you want to talk about? No?
no, ma'am.
Okay, well, nice to see you all. I appreciate you being here, and
Thank
I'll
you.
talk to you next time.
Hi, Daniel.
I have a question for you.
Okay, alrighty.
But I don't know if anybody else is going to be here for that. I don't actually like writing my thoughts on anything. I've got some issues with that. So I don't know how it is that I can prove that I've been at all 8
Oh, you just print out the
sessions with
lessons.
you?
You just print out the lessons.
That's all I have to do is just print them out. Okay. All right. Because I can talk to her about it all she wants, but I just do not like to put things in writing.
Yeah,
I
don't like having to correct them either, so I don't want to do that either.
I'm more of a story person. I like to listen to stories and talk, but I don't like to like write stuff down.
Yeah, yes. Yes. Well, that's why we're doing this, so you don't have to do that.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Talk to you
Have a
soon.
lovely day. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.